When you have a sneaking suspicion that another person may be up to something underhanded, you are left with 3 bleak options: confront the person, ignore the situation, or try to gather more information. If you confront the person, not only does it put him or her on the defensive, but if it turns out you are wrong, there is a good chance you may appear paranoid or jealous and the relationship will suffer. Ignoring the situation can be difficult and possibly damaging to you. Finally, trying to gather more facts on your own is time-consuming and can work against you if you get caught snooping around. Whenever you have a gut feeling that something dishonest is going on, such as your teenage child doing drugs, a stealing employee, or a disloyal friend, use one of the following techniques to find out what a person is really up to or has on his mind. This technique, which I originally introduced in my book, Never Be Lied to Again, virtually guarantees that you can find out within minutes if someone has something to hide. It works like a Rorschach test, also commonly referred to as an inkblot test. The Rorschach test consists of abstract, bilaterally symmetrical splotches of ink blots. The theory behind the test is that a person's interpretation of the shapes will reveal his or her unconscious attitudes and thoughts. With our technique, we use the same theory, but employ it in an entirely new way. Verbalfy. You ask a question that does not accuse the other person of anything but does allude to the situation. Then, simply by gauging the response, you'll be able to FLND out if the person has something to hide. By doing this, you can bring up a sensitive subject and FLND out if someone is comfortable or concerned with the topic, all without making a single accusation. Let's look at an example. A sales manager thinks one of his salespeople may be stealing office supplies. Asking outright, "Have you been stealing from the company?" would put the employee on the defensive, immediately making it nearly impossible to get the truth out of her. If she's not guilty, she'll, of course, tell the manager that she hasn't been stealing. If she is guilty, she will probably lie and say she hasn't pilfered any supplies. Instead, the manager might simply say something non-threatening, such as, "Jill, I'm wondering if you could help me with something. It's come to my attention that someone in the sales department has been taking home office supplies for personal use. Do you have any idea how we can put a stop to this?" Now he simply observes her reaction. If she asks questions and seems interested in the topic of conversation, he can be reasonably sure she is not stealing, but if she becomes very uneasy and seeks to change the subject, then it's likely that she's guilty. If she is innocent, she's likely to offer her advice and be pleased he sought out her opinion. If guilty, she'll become noticeably uncomfortable and probably will assure him that she would never do anything like stealing. No reason exists for her to bring herself into the picture unless, of course, she is the one who feels guilty. Another way to apply the technique is to simply wonder aloud how someone could do a particular thing, what you think the other is doing, and gauge the person's response. Let's see how wondering aloud works. A woman thinks her date is acting slightly odd, and wonders if he is taking some kind of substance, prescribed or otherwise. To FTND out, she can ponder aloud, "Isn't it interesting that people can use drugs and think that others don't? No?" Alternatively, she could say, "I was just reading an article that said 33% of adults have tried recreational drugs at one time or another in their lives." She indirectly raises the subject, observing whether his reaction will indicate if he is hiding his own drug use. Someone who's not engaged in the actions she mentions is likely to join in the conversation willingly, while someone who is involved in the behavior will move to shift the topic of conversation. This technique can also be applied by actually asking the other person for his advice. A hospital administrator suspects a doctor is drinking on duty. She might say, "Dr. Smith, I'd like to get your advice on something. A colleague of mine at another hospital has a problem with one of her doctors. She feels he may be drinking while on call. Do you have any suggestions on how she can best approach this doctor?" Again, if he is guilty of the same behavior, drinking on duty, he is likely to become very uncomfortable. If he isn't drinking on duty, then he will be pleased you sought his advice and will offer it willingly and happily.